Thank you. Thank you, and good morning, or should I say afternoon, everyone. Really happy to be here with you. Thank you very much for those who stayed for the panels. I will be your moderator for today. My name is Azda Kutani. I'm the Vice President for the Emerging Markets at Spring and Nature. I'm very happy to be here today. Also honored to have my fellow panelists with me here today. Yeah, Dr. Krishnan, Dr. Bala, Dr. Banjiri, and Dr. Kalmarkar. Yeah, thank you for joining me here today. As mentioned, today's session is enhancing the research landscape in India's ecosystem. As we have heard this morning from Stephen and also Venkatesh and some of the esteemed guests, obviously India is one of the major powerhouses, yeah, when it comes to the actual output, when it comes to scientific research. We see huge collaboration globally, and India now stands and the third largest research output only after the US and China. And as Venkatesh said, the question is, by when would we become number one? So today's panel, we will focus on what has helped and what are the major factors where India is where it is now. What should we be focusing on? And if there are any challenges, how can we overcome them? We will speak a bit briefly as well and discuss a bit about the funding, yeah, and certain policies which might help funding going forward. And last but not least, we will also speak about industry and academia collaboration, which we also heard this morning from the colleague from Meta. So before I start with my questions, I would like to pass to my fellow guest, maybe 2-3 minutes, introduce yourself, and any opening remarks. If I start with you, Dr. Krishnan.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you for inviting me to this event. I think if you just look at the research landscape in India, as has been emphasized many times since the morning, there is much we can be proud of. We have top research institutes in almost every domain you can think of. And the credit for this must really go to people at the helm of affairs who made these investments over the last 7 decades since independence to create the core infrastructure. And of course, the other credit goes to all our talented individuals who have worked in these different institutions to make all this exciting research happen. What's the biggest challenge today? I think the biggest challenge today is to scale up the research activity and maintain quality at the same time. If you look at the research output from India, we have, of course, several very good institutions across different domains, but we also have a huge network of universities, more than 800 of them, where a good number of them are not really contributing as much as they potentially could. So how do we deepen and also expand research capacity across the country so that we can involve many more of our young, talented individuals in the research process? To me, that seems to be the biggest challenge. How do we address that challenge? There are a few building blocks already in place. The NEP, as has already been emphasized, already underlines the importance of research, so that's one good thing we have. The National Research Foundation, which has been set up by the government, has already announced the intent of investing significantly more in research and also to make that money available to a much larger group of institutions across the country. So I think the final thing really is that we need more talented individuals who are entering the research landscape. We want more students who feel excited enough to join a good PhD program. We need more students, even at the college level, in undergraduate programs who are doing good research and trying to convert that into publications. We have many institutions which have already started doing this. We need to do many more. We need to have, I'm so happy to see so many of you in this hall. We need to have more and more of you who are not in the research ecosystem today becoming part of that ecosystem. And for that, we need to make it more exciting. One way we make it more exciting is by important events like Chandrayaan. But that excitement has to spread beyond Chandrayaan so that we have multiple Chandrayaans. We need to have a huge number of really impactful, exciting projects across sectors. When we have that, we'll be able to attract more and more people into the research ecosystem, and that should translate into much more significant research output. And the last point I will make is, in all of this, we should not lose sight of the fact that the research will start making sense to the country, and it will make sense to the amount of investment we are putting into it when it starts showing some impact on solving national problems. Not every research project needs to do that, but a good number of them need to do that so that the country as a whole feels that the investment which is being made in research is actually plowing back in terms of benefits for the country as a whole.
Thank you. Dr. Bala.
Thank you. Namaste. Good morning, everybody. Thanks to the Ministry of Education for inviting me and having me here. Professor is already at 20,000 feet height, so let me a little bit come down and set the ground from my perspective as I come from the industry. Today you look at the global transformation that's happening globally. Three important things has been considered. One is growth, second one is digitalization, third one is efficiency. If you look at that growth, digitalization, efficiency, and you link that to industry academia ecosystem, I look at adding, instead of industry and academia, I would like to call it as 4 pillars: industry, academia, startups and investors, and the government. I think these 4 pillars have to be strongly interconnected to build that momentum. This is my first opening remark. And today, if you look at our country, last 2 decades back, we've been always focusing on teaching. Then slowly, last decade, we actually aggressively came on learning. Right? I think this is the right time for R&D era. You look at globally, almost 1,140 R&D centers are already there in India. That has employed about 9 lakh people in India. So what it means to us, India is looked at as a R&D destination. Since I come from the industry, IT industry, and I'm more specialized in setting up the Global Capability Center, I just wanted to throw upon this insight, which is very important. Today, you look at the large multinational organization, the 65% of the global multinational captives are based out of India. And today, you look at any top multinational organization out of either from the US or from the Europe or other side of the country of the globe, most of them are looking at setting up their R&D centers in India. Predominantly, they are setting up very deep tech centers. So I think if you again you take a step back, how would this transform? Initially, India was looked at as a cost arbitrage country. Then it was moved, looked at as an efficiency. Then they looked at as an effectiveness. Then they slowly looked at innovation. Then they started looking at value creation. But today, they are looking at India as an R&D hub. With this opening remarks, I hand over the mic to Professor.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's a real pleasure seeing all of you here. I wanted to just get a quick check. How many of you are PhD students? Please raise your hand. Excellent. Large number of PhD students. How many of you are postdoctoral researchers? Okay, a few. How many faculty members? Okay, excellent. So we are basically an audience of PhD students, faculty members. The theme today is enhancing the research landscape in India's academic ecosystem. So there are 2 things: the research landscape and the academic ecosystem. And I'll just make a few points. When we think in terms of research and our academic ecosystem, we increasingly today, research is a competitive venture. It's a venture which is collaborative. It's a venture which is interdisciplinary. It's a venture in many of the science and engineering which requires significant amounts of investment and infrastructure. And in that context, the question is that how do you place your own research? You have your own experience of when you need equipment, how easy is it to get access to that equipment? When you need funding for consumables, how much do you have to struggle? How much time does it take to get those? More importantly, how do you choose your research problem? And how do you ensure that the outcome leads to some value? And how do you measure value? Typically, all of us measure value in terms of standard metrics, and that's a problem. We talk about publications, we talk about patents, but all of these are proxies. The final value is what is the impact, either the impact to society directly or the impact to knowledge, which is more long-term. And here is the thing, how does Indian academic ecosystem compete when we think of globally? And we need to understand that we are looking at people, ideas, facilities, resources. our main advantage, our main and only advantage is people. So we have to leverage our people and our ideas. We will never be able to compete in terms of money and resources. We have to strategically focus on what are the themes and have a relevance of our research. And this is the challenge, because typically what we do is we do follower research. Because naturally, you know, all the Nature and others, you submit a paper to Nature, chances are it's not going to get reviewed. Same person goes to a US university and publishes, at least they will get the review. So we do have a problem, but things are changing. Our ecosystem is also changing. And we need to think in terms of getting, the challenge for us is how do we excite our young people to get into research? And that is something maybe later on we can talk about. We have some mechanisms at IIT Delhi where we are trying to involve youngsters into research. The second challenge that we need to have is we need to have industry value our PhDs. PhDs should not just be going into postdoctorals and into academic institutes and research labs. If we can do that, if we look at a mission and a vision, the places where we've been successful, Chandrayaan, the nuclear, space and nuclear, where technology was denied, and we've actually focused on a mission to do something, got together to do something, had a goal. So when we talk of a research ecosystem, it is not just about technology development, but it's also the fundamental science. And if you look at our overall research investments in terms of percentage of GDP or in terms of absolute amounts, they are really, really small compared to global numbers. Despite that, all our researchers, because we've got good people, and the challenge is how do we leverage that, make our ecosystem stronger. We have to have some strategic methods. We need to provide access to the equipment that is available. We at IIT Delhi have a mechanism where all our central research facilities, Sathi, are accessible to all researchers across the country. And we need more of those things. So I'll stop here in the interest of time, but I'll come back as we go on in the discussion. Thank you so much.
We still encourage you to try and submit to Nature, please, yeah? Yes, Dr. Karmalkar.
So, if the goal is to deepen impact on society and economy, the point I would like to make is that we need to increase or widen participation and raise the average level of the participants who are going to make this impact. Now, how do we do this? So, deepening of the impact and widening of participation are interlinked. As all of us who do research or involved in creative process know, there is a statement or quotation, if you want to get a good idea, you must get a large number of ideas. This is important. So participation and deepening of impact are interlinked. So how do we achieve this? I want to make 4 points. Talk about the mechanism, use of technology to increase participation. Online teaching, online learning is one of the ways in which you can reach a large number of people. Second, at an administrative level, national level, what kind of changes are happening? National Research Foundation. This is one of the mechanisms that is being set up to promote participation as well as deepen the impact. Let's look at the academic area. So I come from Indian Institute of Technology, Bhubaneswar, let's say, right? How are the academics changing and how are they responding? So if you looked at IITs 40 years back, we were supposed to be doing knowledge generation. 30 years back, knowledge applications, solving societal problems also became important if you wanted to gain promotion. Then, now, very recently, last 10 years, IITs are also participating in wealth generation by trying to promote entrepreneurship, startups, and so on. One of the mechanisms that has been thought about for this is a research and entrepreneurship park, which different IITs are trying to establish. In terms of pedagogy, also we need a change. So what is the change? Every researcher or everyone who enters PhD program should know the difference between a course-based education and research. Because of a lack of understanding of this, many people think MTech is advanced BTech, PhD is advanced MTech. That is actually not true. PhD is entirely different from BTech or MTech, which are course-based. So what are the differences? Basically, a researcher has to have above average skills in reading, thinking, communication, collaboration or management, interpersonal management, experimentation, and ethics. Now, this particular aspect we need to impart to the PhD students right when they start their PhD program. Let me give you an example. Suppose you take countries like Israel or Hungary. These are the two countries where you have a large number of Nobel Prize winners in different areas. If you see the average population, let's connect this to the reading habits of people. In Israel, on average, according to statistics that I have, person reads more than 40 books. Whereas in Asian countries, a person reads on average more than just about a book per year. If you take Hungary, for every 500 people, there is a library. So the reading habits of people and the impact on society, these are interlinked. So we need to, what I mean by raising the average level is that we must raise among the average level these reading habits, ability to think, ability to communicate, and so on. If we do this, then ultimately it will result in a much better impact on society. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think very, useful opening remarks, which we will use as a foundation for our questions going forward. So I think my first question would be, as I mentioned earlier, obviously, India is one of the most established, productive, and advanced research systems available globally. As we've said this morning as well, it stands now as third in terms of output, when it comes to article being published from India in different disciplines, Even SDG has been mentioned this morning as well, and we see really great numbers coming out addressing the SDG goals, when it comes to research output. Dr. Bala, maybe I start with you. So how would you characterize India's current research landscape in terms of maturity, productivity, and what factors have contributed to where India is now?
So let me touch upon some facts, my dear friends. Today we see a lot of PhD students, almost the whole audience are PhD students. So I think it would be helpful for me to share some of the facts. As an industry leader, how do I look at the research impact, research ecosystem? Today you look at India as a third largest ecosystem for startup with more than 85,000 startup, with about 110 plus unicorns, with 5,000 funded startup and so on and so forth. You look at, there is a gap. So today for the postdocs or PhDs or to enter the research, there are like two avenues. One is either you need to be part of a large research and R&D organization where you need to be part of it and start collaborating with them. Or you need to have your own funding, either from the grants or from the university or some of the partners can do. And the third avenue is the startup ecosystem. So we can't evade startup ecosystem from the overall research and innovation ecosystem. With that context, if you look at today, the digital penetration is backed with about 65% of internet penetration of about $2.5 trillion transaction. Okay? The talent is becoming skilled talent, reskilling and skilling is happening consistently in our country, right? And the availability of largest workforce in terms of having the fresh graduates, almost 32 million graduates with 1 million jobs in the startup area alone. On track, there are almost 1 trillion Indians especially started looking at $1 trillion of economy started moving with having establishment in tier 2 cities. And learning from the India's largest domestic market. With all these things, you look at the power of India today, what we have built in R&D system. Almost there are 6 nations already started using our India stack. Countries like Philippines, Morocco, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Tunisia, Uganda started using India stack, which is built few years back. So which is like really a proud moment, so that it's very clearly evident that India is paving an extraordinary way in terms of the R&D ecosystem. You take Aadhaar, it makes presence-less, right? It's very clearly evident. The presence-less is evidence through Aadhaar. You look at KYC and DigiLocker, that is an evidence for paperless economy. You take UPI, it's a cashless economy. You take content, where the schemes like Sahamati, it's a demonstration of content. With all these things, you take the 3 open networks which is created by the India R&D ecosystem, which is ONDC, right? Open Network Digital Commerce. And you take OCEN, and the other one is UHI, United Health Interface. So these three open networks play a phenomenal role that demonstrates what kind of R&D has been built in the country. So with all these things, I think it's very clearly evident India is much forwarded, much ahead in the R&D ecosystem. But the question mark or the gap, what we are discussing today is, how does it impact, or in what way it could be better impactful towards the industry, academia ecosystem, is what we need to discuss over a period of next few minutes or so. Yeah.
Thank you. Any addition from any of the panelists on the same point? Dr. Krishnan, maybe you want to say something? Okay. Anjali? Okay. So my second question would be obviously to do with funding. Yeah. So I think it's also been mentioned this morning and earlier, funding is very important, yeah, for scientific research, to build an infrastructure, yeah, to enhance and improve, and also to, you know, make it easier for people to get access to, I think you mentioned labs, equipments, everything. So maybe Dr. Banerjee, I give it to you as well. The question is, what's the impact has been so far? Yeah. So if you look at the recent years with all the progress India has been achieving, how much of the impact has played a major role in making things happen, and could there be more to improve on the funding side?
So I think in terms of what has been the research impact, and you know, Chandrayaan is fresh in memory. ISRO is connected with all the IITs and many of the other CSIR labs. The Department of Atomic Energy is another one. We, in various fields, recently all the IITs and ISC got together to build an indigenous 5G capability. And basically the idea was that we would have an indigenous 5G capability, and that is being used, and the idea is that industry can take that up. The funding in the Indian context of research is predominantly from government and public sector today. And that is a problem because historically, of course, that's changing. For instance, I'll just give you an idea. In IIT Delhi last year, we did about 350 crores of research funding. About 50 crores comes from industry. It's a growing number, but it's a smaller number. So the extent of funding, the absolute magnitude of funding needs to increase. Also, the share of funding from industry needs to increase. But the ecosystem for translation and the ecosystem, we have a lot of startups and innovation, but to scale, you know, if I have a product, I make a few, but if I have to make thousands, 10,000s, a million, then I need an industry partner who needs to manufacture it. We need material, special material we've got, we need to have them tested and made. Then we need to have manufacturing capabilities. So this ecosystem is changing, but this is something historically where we have been dependent on buying technology. And the focus of the Prime Minister on making us Atmanirbhar, the point in all of this is these things, to do this, we need to have a strategy. We need to ensure that we make the appropriate investments. There is a lot of research which has to happen in the industry environment. And there has to be a synergy between industry and the academia, which is the feeder to the industry. So there has to be a demand from the industry for research. And the academia needs to be able to fulfill that demand. We are having conversations. And we had recently at IIT Delhi an event of all the IITs showcasing some of the technologies that are available for licensing. But despite this, industry has to be globally competitive. And we cannot pause and wait for the 3, 4, 5 years that is needed to develop that ecosystem. And this is the challenge. So we have to strategically identify a few areas where we can get a competitive advantage through our technology development and build that. That is happening in some of these areas, but I think that may be one of the solutions.
Absolutely. So I'll pass to you, Dr. Krishnan, but also I will have a small addition actually, because I think what you mentioned is very interesting in terms of, industry playing a major part in improving the research. Now the question as well, because we've discussed, earlier this week and also this morning, it has been mentioned, the equity. Yeah, so we would like to make sure as well there is equal opportunity to everyone to have access to content, to research, and potentially publish their research. So if you can, add your addition as well and maybe elaborate a bit more in terms of how would funding help equity, across India.
Yeah, though it's undoubtedly true that Indian research spending is low by global standards, I'm not completely sure that funding is the only problem. Because I think even if you had much more funding in many institutions, the institutional capacity to absorb that funding and do good research doesn't always exist, which means you need good research management skills, you need procurement, there's a whole lot of internal ecosystem which also needs to be created if effective research is to be done in any organization. Surprisingly, that same problem exists in industry as well. If you look at some of India's largest companies and look at their profit levels are extremely impressive. You must see the quarterly results that companies announce. So clearly there is no shortage of money. But what there seems to be some shortage of is the imagination, the ideas, the strategy, and the internal processes to take that money and invest it effectively in research with some useful outcomes. So I personally believe that while funding is an important issue, unless you build strong organizational capabilities, whether it be in academia or in industry, you will really struggle in converting that additional funding into very impactful output. So that seems to me to be a bigger challenge. In fact, these days when I talk to a lot of people, I sometimes feel that what we really need is better ideas. And if you have better ideas, I have a suspicion that money will also come. Because if you look at the country as a whole, it's not as though there is a huge shortage of money for good ideas. I mean, Bala was just telling us about the kind of money that's gone into the startup ecosystem. If you have good idea in the startup ecosystem, it actually attracts funding. And I'm not at all, I doubt that if you have a good idea in academia, it will not attract. You will be able to attract funding for that as well. So particularly for our researcher friends here, I would not start with the assumption that funding is the constraint. I would start with the assumption that you really need to have a good idea which can either advance knowledge or advance some utility in society or business. And if you can then articulate that idea well and make a good case for it, you may also be able to raise funding for it. That's broadly the way I think about funding today.
I'd like to add upon. See, how many of you have visited your technology business incubator in your college? Very few. See, this is the major problem. So the MIT has funded, along with Ministry of Education, a very good sum of money to every technology incubator. I'm sure a small institute like SAAA to Sri City has about 20 startups. We have about a crore or like about 1.6 crores of funding invested in about 10 lakh in each startup. So see, this is the fundamental problem. If the PhDs, research scholars, postdoc does not have an access to your technology business incubator, for me this is a real gap. Right? Number one. Number two, like Professor said, funding is the least thing. Today, anybody have a right idea, you're able to make an impact, especially the Smart India Hackathon made a fantastic transformation globally. Everybody started looking at India with this Smart India Hackathon. So if anyone has a good idea, you are capable of making a POC, between 100,000 rupees to 1 crore rupees, without any of your investment, government fundings are there. There are almost 17 such schemes from different departments which are available, easily obtainable. It's not a rocket science. So the problem here is the lack of knowledge about those funds. That's the second thing. In fact, I highlighted these points to our secretary sir, to even our minister also when there is appropriate time, when I met them last time. So this is the second important problem that the student. The third thing, I think this is another important, the faculty development program. I think big roadblock here is faculty. When I say roadblock, between the students and the outcome, faculties are expected to play that role. Unfortunately today, the faculty ecosystem is not completely enabled with that, right? That has to be really taken out of very seriously, because today students are so smart. You don't need anybody to guide you. You're all like extremely smart enough. You have a problem, you know how to find a solution. But the problem is from 0 to 1 is easy to claim. But one to next steps are real question mark that can be done only by faculties. Further, the faculties have to be enabled. I'll give one example what we have done in IIIT Sri City. We have got two things. One is, we have got every student at the UG 3 level, they need to take a semester-long project. They need to tie up with the industry and have to do one semester-long project. This has been so successful because the success is measured in a form of a salary, I would say, because 3 years back, 8.5 lakhs was an average salary. Last year, it was 12.5 lakhs. Today, it is 20 lakhs, and the highest package is 93 lakhs. In a tier 2 city like Sri City, okay, IIIT, again, NIT, IIT, NITs are much more higher than IIITs, but still we are able to touch upon this 93 lakhs of CTC. It's not an easy thing. The reason why we were able to achieve, we were able to make some small transformation. Likewise, when I was having a casual conversation with faculty members, the full stack is really a very, very hot topic everywhere, right? Unfortunately, some of the or I would say most of the faculty members may not have a hands-on on full stack because during their PhD or their MS, they will not have had an opportunity. But we are teaching full stack, right? So this is a time where, fortunately, some of our board of governors are techies from the industry. So we went up and said that, hold on, let's ensure all the faculty members undergo a full stack development, have an hands-on training, and then teach the students. And this was impacted last year, a very good impact to the students. I mean, the reason for sharing these real examples are, I mean, we need to take some basic problems have to be identified and fixed upon.
Thank you. Can I ask you a question, then you can wrap it together, because I would like to give the audience some time for questions, because we have 15 minutes taken away from us, so we have less time now. Actually, in line with this, because you've addressed so many of the issues, and you've also mentioned, in a way, the way forward, right? So you touched upon industry collaboration, you've touched upon the funding and GDP relation and how much people get paid and so on and so forth. So maybe you can, say a bit, and then if you can tell me a bit about the timeline. Do you think there is a very clear direction in terms of where we're heading to? I mean, this morning as well, we heard the 2047, initiative or vision. Is there a very clear direction, and is there a very clear timeline when and where to get to?
I'd just like to, first of all, echo the views of the panelists. I think at the macro level, funding is a constraint. But at the level of the PhD students, for all of you, if you have an idea, funding is not a constraint. And the problem is that in the PhD, we have so much of depth. You are focusing on a particular problem. You don't often see how that problem fits into the overall perspective. So I would really encourage you to think in terms of your idea and taking it forward and looking at the incubators which were suggested. There is a dearth of ideas, and if there is individually, if you have an idea in our ecosystem, there is money available to you. The problem in our case is that many of our places, the PhD journey is, we have blinkers, we just look at our problem. We have to look at our problem, but we also have to see, if you solve that problem, what will be the impact? What is going to be the impact in society? The second point which Professor Krishnan made, which I think I completely endorse, is that we have to look at our internal processes. And I think all of you will realize that. How do we make sure that the researchers spend most of their quality time on research, not on chasing making sure that you get your equipment up or seeing that your purchase process. So we have to, in many of our cases, and especially in the government sector, we have processes and systems which are actually intended for large-scale purchase and procurement. And research is a time-bound activity where you cannot always decide based on the results. You will see what you do next. You will not be able to prescribe, and you need to have those things in time. And that is a challenge because the timelines, we have colleagues, many of us go for sabbaticals in Europe and US. When you want to purchase an equipment, purchase chemicals, you just pick up the phone and do it, and then you in our systems and processes, it takes much more time. And so that is something we are trying to work on. We need to simplify our systems and processes so that researchers basically can focus on their research. To come back to your question in terms of long-term timelines, of course, we have, our Prime Minister has established the focus that by 2047, we should be a developed country. We should also look at Atmanirbharta. In many of the domains, in semiconductors, in the energy sector, we have got individual timelines. The challenge for the research and academic community is to create a roadmap and also to see in all of this, we can't do everything. So we will have to have some strategies, and so there are interim timelines. And each researchers, we compete, we collaborate as institutions. So in some of the domains, some of these things are being done. But I think that is also with industry, we need to have these dialogues and see, because industry is also competing. Today, whether it's industry, whether it's academic institutions, we are competing globally. And we are training people who are, our best people are often are picked up by global industry also. So that is, so we need to have, as I said, in some domains there are very clear-cut missions. And the idea is that we will need to use research which will empower our country going forward and give our industry a competitive advantage.
Thank you. I would like to ask you to add if there are any specific challenges you think you would like to add to the discussion. But before I pass the microphone to you, I just want to make sure our volunteers are nearby for the questions so they can pass the microphone on. Not yet? Yeah. So just make sure you are nearby. Please.
I think a lot of points have been covered. There's one aspect that I would like to emphasize. See, there is a quotation. It is not the gun, but the hands behind the gun which win a war. It is not the hands behind the gun, but spirit in man which wins the war. Now, the human resource development, this is very important. So even as we simplify processes, create mechanisms for more funding and so on, how do you raise the average level of the human being who is participating in this? So what are the pedagogical improvements that one can do? Now, let's take India's semiconductor mission. Now, one of the requirements for success of this mission is available manpower within the country for running the facilities and for doing the research on that and so on. So for this purpose, you need to really raise the level of awareness about semiconductor industry in India. Now, this is a great challenge. Even as you bring companies and so on, fabrication related companies in India, the mission will take off only if this is matched by availability of manpower. So, for example, the content related to semiconductors in all our technological institutions has to be increased. Some institutions are also considering doing a BTech program or specialization in semiconductors. Another major initiative that government has taken is to build good quality school teachers. Now, this is very important. All of us know our excitement and so on, it develops during the school education. And in fact, National Education Policy has also pointed out that 85% of the brain development happens by the age of 10. So, unless level of school teachers is improved, we cannot expect spectacular successes. So, integrated teacher education program is one of the programs which is trying to build good quality teachers. So we need to invest our time and energies also in developing good quality school teachers. That is another thing. The third thing is industry-institute collaboration. I want to add to what others have said. Within institution, we have what is called a professor of practice scheme. Earlier, only a person who had a PhD could get into, let us say, a place like IIT. But all of us know, now let's take the success of the Chandrayaan mission. many of the participants there, in fact, or I would say majority of them are non-PhD holders. So there are people who gain lot of knowledge, practical knowledge and so on through experience and self-learning and working in these environments. So we need to tap that talent into our educational system. So Professor of Practice is a scheme where a non-PhD holder, but having a lot of a deep experience in specific areas can become a professor in an IIT system. So many more things can be talked about, but because of the paucity of time, I will stop.
Thank you, thank you. So we can pass now to the audience. Please, if any questions, raise your hand. Please state your name, your question very quickly if you can, and to which panelist. Yeah, so we have here, maybe easy for the microphone.
Hello. Thank you. Good to hear from all the panelists the positive vibe about the current development systems. My questions to all the panel, because you come from all premier institutions, IITs and IIMs. The audience also from all premier institutions. When somebody asked how many have visited TBIs, Technology Business Incubator, I see maybe 2-3 hands. What do you think? Where is the disconnect? Why deep science-based researchers are not getting into innovation platform? What is the disconnect? Because NEP talks about that also. That's my question. And I come from KIT University. I'm also running a technology business incubator. Questions to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, any?
Yeah, I think the point was made earlier. I don't want to blame anybody, but I think it's also partly to do with the faculty. Because the faculty often guide students in what kind of problems they should choose. If you choose a problem which is oriented towards publishing another few papers in a journal, but may not have a wider perspective in mind, as many of the other panelists mentioned, the probability that that can also be part of something which goes into the incubation process is much lower. I think in many of the IITs, and the one I'm most familiar with is IIT Madras, I think you're seeing some kind of a change happening. When I last went to IIT Madras, they told me about 15-20% of the faculty at least are involved in startups. A similar percentage is involved in industry collaboration. The moment you have that happening, where a significant proportion of the faculty are involved in that, the kind of problems which students will work on will also change. And once the problem students work on will change, the probability or possibility of incubation and commercialization will also increase. Absent that, it's not surprising that the problems chosen are those which are likely to lead to journal publication.
That's why when I began my conversation, I said the 4 pillars. Industry, academia, government, and the startups has to be linked. So the TBI thing, which is a great question you asked, I think the fundamental problem, as is said, the faculty has to do that. How many of you are aware of co-creation? Co-creation? Yeah, maybe hardly about 2-3 people, right? So again, this is again another important thing. Today, getting the top multinational companies or R&D centers directly to colleges may be challenged. For IITs, NITs, IIITs, it is maybe okay. But for the other tier 1, tier 2 organization, institutions, it may be a big challenge. So how do you attract that larger ecosystem in your college? I think co-creation is the only opportunity available, and Ministry of Education and IT is extremely supporting for co-creation, because these top multinational organizations like to identify the startups based out of that institution. Part of the faculties and the students are part of that incubator who are aligned towards the domain and sector. Try to work with that co-creation, with that startup. By then, co-creation starts, and by then, the whole process get expanded. Yeah.
So, time? I can skip.
Yeah. Now, just wanted to add, one of the reasons for this is also different a mismatch in the perceptions about each other. So I will just share very briefly an experience. When I joined as an assistant professor in IIT Madras, I was all excited and wanted to do all industry-oriented research. So I would go to an industry on my own, and I say that I want to meet the CMD and tell, how I can help your industry. So many of the people in industry discouraged me, saying, look, you will not get an audience, because the perception about a professor in industry is that he is in a different world. The industry is in a different world. So it is this mismatch of perceptions. So when I managed to get some time, I explained to the person in the industry that supposing you take this specific technology and try to put some people in development guided by a professor, perhaps the technology may not get developed, but the knowledge that will get generated will help you to improve your other processes which you have, which the industry is, manufacturing process which industry is having. So the industry also needs to understand that a specific objective may not be achieved, but the byproducts are also something that you can gain a lot from.
You will answer the next question if you have no choice. So. Yeah, please. Yeah, second to third row. We have two questions next to each other, so we can keep the microphone close. Huh? Okay.
Hello, sir. I'm Vishal. Thanks a lot for your thoughts. Your voice are music to my ear. But this is a personal question. I'm from IIT Kharagpur, and my daughter is now preparing in 12th standard. You know, we are talking about research in the academic ecosystem, but unfortunately, in the school system, this is not being inculcated into the students. For preparing for any of the competitive examination, they are never being taught or asked for what you have done, okay, how you have developed the temperament. So how we imagine the demographic advantage which we are having can be converted into building good researchers when they are not being taught about the way of finding a problem and trying to solve a problem from a research point of view.
Sir, with my knowledge, I would strongly disagree with you because the last 2.5 years, Ministry of Education Innovation Cell have taken extraordinary effort, and we have also have Anil Sahasrabudhe sir. When under his leadership, I think the cell would have been incorporated under AISTE. Almost, I don't know the exact number, I'm sure several thousands, lakhs of students, school students were part of this innovation activity. It was like a month-long program. They were part of the startup ecosystem. They were asked to develop certain prototypes. And in fact, to a level of explaining about design thinking, applying design thinking in terms of startup and innovation, that was a kind of steps taken by the Ministry of Education focusing for the school students. This is up to, as far as my knowledge is concerned.
Thank you. I will, actually, I've just been told that we are the only thing stopping you from going to lunch. And I'm sure you would like to have lunch. So everyone will be around for lunch. If you feel free, please, to reach out to our panelists to ask any individual questions. I will pass to each one quickly, 2 minutes, closing remarks. Yeah, then we can wrap it up and go to lunch. So maybe start with you.
So to deepen the impact, we should widen the participation and raise the average level of the human being who is participating in this research enterprise. And there are various ways of doing it. One of them is improving the pedagogy a lot.
So I think, we have a world of opportunities in the country. There is a lot of unserved demand. If you see in any domain, there are challenges that we need to meet. If our researchers focus on solving the right problems, there is no dearth of funding. We need to create the ecosystem, but we need, as academic institutions, we need to be able to give people the choice to and the ability to choose the right problems to work on.
I think the friends who were at the back could have waited for 5 more minutes. I consider that also as a problem. But anyway, I think from my side, 2 cents is very simple. I think the union government and the Ministry of Education has taken an enormous steps in terms of the transformation, which is very clearly evident in the last 10 years. I think from the industry side, a lot of transformation has happened. From academicians, a lot of transformation is happening. Startup ecosystem is extraordinarily, superb. I think my 2 cents is everything has to be strongly, consciously interconnected. That is something where that is the gap is, we need to do that. And again, technology is only an enabler, my dear friends. Keep technology as the least priority. Beyond technology, today you look at World Economic Forum report, 2021, 22, 23, the technologies, top 10 technology doesn't exist. Other than the generative AI and one more, I think. Everything is replaced. So it's keep changing. So what is fundamental important thing is the value system, Indian knowledge system, your connection within this ecosystem is very, very important. Thank you.
So I would just like to conclude by offering a few unsolicited suggestions to some of our young researcher friends here. There are 2 or 3 points which I would request you to keep in mind. One is I would strongly urge you to take advantage of whatever significant differentiators the Indian context has. One important differentiator is our ability to do things at low cost, which you have seen at Chandrayaan. Don't lose that ability. The ability to also understand phenomena in India that might be unique. For example, if you look in the management domain, we have so many good examples, whether it be digital payments, whether it be Aadhaar. I mean, there's so many things happening here that are very unique to India. But the surprise is you will finally find people outside India writing papers on those phenomena, and people in India will not be doing it. So I think you should take full advantage of the local context. Second important thing I would like to underline is that you should build your own distinctive capability. At least in management research, I can clearly see that there are multiple capabilities you can build. You can either be an expert in your domain, or you can be an expert in methods, or you can be an expert in how to crunch data, or you can be very good at synthesizing different things together and putting it all together, which is not an easy skill, or you could be very good at doing interdisciplinary research. Of course, it's desirable that you have multiple of these things, but very few individuals have all of these. So maybe take 1 or 2 things in which you are really good and deepen them further. And lastly, I would suggest that you should really be looking at continuously building new skills. This point was made earlier. The kind of skills you need in research today, particularly in many domains, you need AI, you need ML, you need coding skills. Those are not the skills people maybe needed 15, 20 years back. So just keep up to date with the skills that you require to be a good researcher in your field. If you do that, then you have a long shelf life as a researcher. Otherwise, you will face challenges in keeping at the cutting edge of your area. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we break, thank you very much all, really, for attending and for your interest. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the panelists during lunch. My fellow panelists, thank you very much for your time. I think it doesn't matter if we had 1 hour or 10 hours, we'll carry on talking all day anyway. So I think we covered the major points. So thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you to all the panelists. I would like to now request Asma to felicitate all the panelists, starting with Professor Rishikesh Krishnan. Professor Rangan Banerjee. Professor Srimad Karmarkar.